Hello guys, I'm going to be doing a little bit different video than I typically do here. This is going to be for the IS-3A, coming in the 1.3 World of Tanks update. Currently it's on the common test server. Hey little buddy, Levi's down here trying to get in the video. Basically in 1.3, Wargaming is deciding to update the IS-3A Premium. It's been in the game for a while. Basically adding a auto reloading gun to it. Now, looking at like the details here, the IS-3A technically, yes, it does stand for basically an auto reloading IS-3A with a different, loading mechanism. So yes, it technically makes sense adding it to this tank. As far as my knowledge, it is like this on consoles, I believe, World of Tanks console. But adding this into 1.3, is it actually balanced? In a way, I think this is a pretty bad mistake because Wargaming, is basically testing adding auto reloaders to heavy tanks, not just the IS-3A. They do have plans as far as what they've said in Q&As before, not recently, but in previous months and years, testing bringing this to more than just the Italian tanks and more than just like medium and possibly like light tanks, because currently only the Italian medium tanks have the auto reloading mechanism. The IS-3A here though, it's got the 390 damage that you would expect from an IS-3. However, it has 3 shells in its auto reloader. The first one, with this configuration here, all the crew skills and relevant equipment, it does not have access to a rammer anymore. I know some of the Italian tanks do have a rammer along with the auto reloader. IS-3A does not, only has access to vents. So basically the lowest you can get the reload here without adding, say, food onto the tank is 11.1 seconds for that first shell in the auto reloader. Once you fire 2 shells, it'll then take 13.9 seconds to reload that second shell, and then 11.1 to reload the first shell too. And then if you fire all 3, it's 16.7 seconds. Basically, to fire all 3 shots, then reload that third shell back into the clip. Now, when it comes to this tank, visually, it looks, outside of the new decals and stuff that they're adding in 1.3 as well, it looks virtually identical to the IS-3 here. The turret is slightly different, which, surprise, surprise, armor-wise, the effective armor values on the turrets are virtually identical from the front. However, IS-3A's is slightly better in my opinion because the cupolas are actually smaller, and yes, you can kind of pen them if you hit them in the right spot, 1 out of a million times, whereas the IS-3s, you can kind of hit this area sometimes. It's still pretty small, but it is at least a weak spot, albeit not used very often. So technically, IS-3A, same like armor and like visually the same as the IS-3, but slightly just a pinch better. I do note this tank, it is a somewhat older premium at tier 8, to where a lot of people have sold it. It hasn't been like the best tank, which is why they're giving it a refresh. But what this video is kind of going to be about, I'm going to try to pop into a battle, but there is a bug on the test server here to where I'm trying to do this video live, and I've also tried to do this video with replays, but it's just kind of I feel like doing it that way. There's a bug on the test server where the CPU goes up to like 90 to 100% usage. They haven't fixed it yet, so I'll try to play a battle. We'll see how it works. But this is more of like a rant video, which I typically don't do because adding auto reloaders onto heavy tanks I feel like is a terrible idea. So taking 390 damage from an IS-3, just going with the IS-3 itself right now, let's pop down to tier 6 and 7, which I'm just going to use American tanks because they're just kind of, normal. For lack of better words, they're kind of in the middle for a lot of things. So 390 damage, say you're shooting a tier 6 light, you're basically not going to one-shot the thing. Once you add that second shell on, you're going to one-shot virtually as far as tier 6s go. Let me just filter for tier 6 right now. you're going to one-shot tier 6 light, or not one-shot, but two-shot, which it takes 3 seconds to load that second shot. So in 3 seconds, you'll delete tier 6 lights, you'll delete tier 6 mediums. Heavy tanks, debatable, it depends on if you get a high roll, but you still have that third shot that'll come 6 seconds from your first shot to the third. If you have everything loaded, it'll take you 6 seconds if you fire as fast as possible. So basically you're going to delete any tier 6, like TDs, they have low HP too, so they're 2-shot. You're going to delete any tier 6, more or less, with either 2, or if it's a heavy tank and you don't get a slightly above average roll, you'll have to do 3 shots for heavies at tier 6. I know there's stuff like the TOG and stuff, but just generally speaking, the IS-3A can kill with a slightly above average roll, so that kills heavy tanks, can kill any tier 6 tank technically in 3 seconds if it's loaded. If not, it'll be 6 seconds for virtually any single tier 6. Tier 7s, whereas if the standard IS-3, it would take 10 seconds to get that second shot around, and then if you didn't get the good rolls, then it would take you 20 seconds technically, about roughly, to kill a tier 6 heavy, since it doesn't have the auto reloader. Tier 7s, I guess going back to American tanks, because you know, they're kind of middle of the road for everything. You know, when it comes to like a T-71, you're going to be able to, with slightly above average rolls on the IS-3A, at least for 1 shot's worth, if not both, you're going to 2-shot them. Going to the T-20, you know, that's a 3-shot technically, as long as you hit like the average damage. T-29, you would need slightly above average rolls to basically kill it on, if not 2, if not all 3 of your shots. So you won't be able to just clip a tier 7 unless you get lucky, but you know, if the T-29 loses a little bit of HP, it's technically possible, because the IS-3A with all 3 shots does 1,170 damage. So, you know, it's there. And then TDs, basically, they're in the high roll for 2-shot, if not 3-shot range. So the problem with the IS-3A is, like, I'm going to get into these stats and compare it to other tier 8s, but just the thought of adding auto reloaders onto high alpha tanks, it's just broken. You can't balance it. The where, yes, you have auto loaders at tier 8, say like the AMX 5100, Lorraine 40T and stuff, but like, take for example the AMX 5100, like the Smo SM and stuff, you have to use that full magazine, or else, you know, you can fire some of them, then reload, but you're useless in between them. They also have, typically as far as like aiming time and stuff, it's a little funky, whereas the aiming time on this, fully kitted out and everything, 2.72 seconds, so that's shorter than your 3-second reload between shells, so you're going to be able to fully aim in, albeit with slightly poor accuracy at 0.42 with the equipment and stuff in it. But anyway, just as a whole, I think it's a bad idea, the auto-reloading mechanic itself on high alpha heavies. I think it would make sense expanding it to, say, like the Leopard 1, it would work well with. Some light tanks, if they had those mechanisms, it would work well with them. You know, with the wheeled vehicles coming, obviously, possibly they could use it as well. But, like, when you think about the IS-3A, it's just not balanced, because you can't balance it against tier 6s and 7s, because currently, you know, auto loaders, so the traditional ones in the game, they still crap all over tier 6s and 7s, and they even murder tier 8s if they have a full clip, and you're 1v1 and you hit your shots, actually. But you have that downside of your gun still kind of unruly, to where you throw the IS-3A in here, to where it has alpha. You can use it in a single shot form to have virtually the same DPM. It's like a 3 DPM difference than the standard IS-3. And, you know, if you throw all 3 clips out, you have that high alpha, just under 1200 damage for all 3 shots, if you get average rolls. And worst case scenario, you don't finish a tank off, and then you reload, you know, your first shell back in after using the 3 shots in 16.7 seconds, instead of potentially waiting like 30-40 seconds for a different autoloader. But anyway, let's get into the comparison here. So the IS-3A, what differences does it have compared to the standard IS-3? Guns do the same damage per shot. Penetration, a little bit lower in the IS-3A, to where it does have a heat shell, 270 millimeters for the pen. IS-3 itself has an APCR shell, 265. So technically higher pen, but the heat is a lot more wonky than APCR in general. So the IS-3 basically has the more usable penetration, but they're virtually, it's kind of a wash in a way. Now, getting down to this, obviously the auto reloading mechanic on the IS-3A, the only other tank in this comparison is the Progetto with that. I didn't include the Pantera, just so I don't have to scroll because I'm lazy. Turret traverse, a little bit slower in the IS-3A than the IS-3 itself. Now, when it comes down to it, the turret traverse, it is noticeable. It is a negative, but it's not that big of a deal, to be honest. Yes, it's a little low, but it's not a game breaker. Gun elevation, lower in the IS-3A than the IS-3. But in general, if you're looking at the big picture here, look at the other tanks here, it's honestly still better than a lot of them. And, it's not a deal breaker. Yes, it's lower, but it's not a real negative. Now, 3 seconds in between shells. So if you have the first shell loaded, to fire number 2, it's going to be 3 seconds. Fire number 3 right away, it's going to be 6 seconds. And you have 3 shells in your auto reloader. As far as like burst damage, yes, it is lower than a Samo SM, AMX 5100, a Emil 1. But, those also have those drawbacks of their damage per shot, 320, 300 on these compared to 390 on the IS-3A. Plus they have the standard autoloader that, has those massive downsides to where you can't start reloading a shell until you either reload your whole clip or expend the entire clip. Now, kind of some differences. Aiming time here. IS-3A better than the IS-3, and yes, it's worse than like the SM. It's the same as the AMX 5100, to where the aiming time isn't stellar, but for the alpha it has, it's not that bad. As long as you're not like moving around, if you're standing still, it will aim in fully in between your shells. Now the dispersion, 0.43, the worst out of any of these tanks here. So basically, it is inaccurate, and a lot less accurate than the IS-3 itself at 0.38, which isn't the best value in its own right, to where the accuracy does keep this a little bit tame against like armored vehicles, or especially if you're using heat, you can hit tracks often. So it does keep it somewhat in line against tier 9s and 10s, as long as, if you're fighting a light or a lightly armored medium or TD or no armor, IS-3As, the accuracy is not going to troll you too much because the aiming time helps it out a little bit. So, it's basically balancing it a little bit against higher tiers, which, that's something, but it's still going to crap all over tier 6s, tier 7s, and tier 8s are even going to struggle even more so with an IS-3A than an IS-3 in a lot of cases. Now, the DPM here, so these DPM values and the stats in general, the way I have these configured, I have vents on the IS-3A and autoloaders that have vents but not rammers. If a tank has a rammer, say like the Progetto down here, has a rammer, but I didn't put vents on it. So basically, the way people configure their tanks, I figure people are either going to put a rammer on their tank if it has access to it, because it makes sense. You'd be dumb not to. And if you don't have access to a rammer, you're at least going to put vents on it. If you have access to both, like the Progetto, you might put rammer and vents, but I just went with the rammer for that. So it gives you kind of a better sense of the DPM values once you add that on. Otherwise, 100% crew, no brothers in arms, so on and so forth. Your DPM here, it's a massive 3 DPM less than the standard IS-3 if you shoot one shell at a time. So, the downside is the accuracy mainly, the slightly different premium shell, and, gun elevation that doesn't come into play too often, and the slightly slower turret traverse. But your DPM is virtually identical to the standard IS-3 until, you shoot 2 shells or 3 shells and you keep reloading that second or third shell. Then your DPM, if you shoot 1 shell, It's in like the 1600 range, low 1600s. If you fire all 3 shells, then just keep that 3rd shell reloading without letting them replenish. You're going to be in about the 1300 range, I believe. So pretty bad for a tier 8, but you know, you're an IS-3 that can chuck 3 shells out in 6 seconds, virtually. Now, moving on to survivability. When it comes down to it, it has 50 more HP than the IS-3. I already pointed out the cupola is a lot harder to hit, and basically it's non-existent. So armor basically the same, but cupola's better, which it leans in IS-3A's favor, and HP slightly in its favor as well, given that in this comparison here it has more HP than any other tier 8. Again, in this comparison, not in general, but these are the tanks, you know, I feel like are the best comparison to it when it comes to autoloaders, auto reloader, heavy tanks, you know. Mobility. So that's something where the IS-3A actually struggles with. Engine power is a lot weaker than the IS-3 itself, giving it a pretty bad specific power, the worst out of this comparison here. Like, it is really slow for a heavy tank, to be honest. Your top speed 40 is higher than the IS-3, but you don't really reach it unless you're going downhill, or you spend a really long time hitting it on level ground. Where combine that with the slower traverse speed, which is the worst out of this, it is slower. So, you know, you have worse accuracy, lower mobility. But the problem with this tank doesn't always come with that. The V range is the same. The only difference here is vents being on this, which is what's giving you this slight difference here. And camouflage is virtually the same as well between the two. You know, the problem with the IS-3A is, yes, it does have downsides. You know, it has the worst accuracy, or, you know, poorer accuracy than the IS-3, and it has the lower mobility. Both are very noticeable, but it's just, I don't think that you can balance an auto-reloading mechanism on a heavy tank. I actually didn't want to close out of that, because when you look at it, 390 alpha, and you get that across 3 shells at tier 8, so you're going to see a lot of tier 6s, 7s, 8s, like even like light tanks at tier 9 and stuff. It's a big chunk of damage for a mechanism that doesn't have like huge drawbacks. Like, yes, it hurts your DPM, but you still have that flexibility, and it's just hard to balance, in my opinion, on a heavy, because when you look at like the Progetto, 240 damage, so 150 less damage per shot, and you still have, you know, the 3 rounds. Yes, it shoots them basically in 2 seconds instead of 3, but 240 damage is basically a far cry compared to 390 damage at tier 8, to where, yes, it's gonna, the Progetto, it really murders tier 6s, especially if it pens all of its shots, and it can really hurt a tier 7, but it's not like you're just gonna completely delete them with no chance of them responding, because the thing doesn't have armor. It's got basically less HP working for it, to where, yes, it's more flexible, but, you know, it's more vulnerable to dying, and also the gun has that less of an alpha strike, given that the auto reloader mitigates a lot of the downsides of a auto reloader, you know, since it keeps replenishing shells as long as you know, aren't firing before that shell gets put back into the rack. So, in my opinion, like, the auto reloading mechanism, it makes this tank a hell of a lot better. Like, don't get me wrong, the IS-3A hasn't been like the most popular tier 8 premium to play in quite some time, to where when it was released, a lot of people didn't pick it up because it's not that good of a crew trainer either. It only has 3 crew members, whereas the IS-3 has 4, and other Soviet heavies, you know, have more, 4 or more as well. But for game balance, kind of opening up the can of worms to add auto reloaders on heavy tanks, I feel like is a terrible idea. Yes, it could work at like tier 10. Say if, you know, they add it like the ST2 with the dual barrels. Say that has a 2-shot auto reloader at tier 10. That could work, because you're not facing tier 7s and 6s where your HP is really low compared to the alpha as you start hitting like tier 8 and stuff. You know, higher tiers, the time to kill on a tank tier 8 through 10 is much larger than it is at lower tiers. Like the mid tiers, basically it's less than 30 seconds. It's between like 15 and 30 seconds you're looking at tier 6, 7, and sometimes 8. Once you start reaching tier 9 and 10, it goes up to like 35 to 45 seconds, basically, respectively, across like averages for all the tech tree tanks. Some will stand out, like higher alpha tanks that can like 2-shot or 1-shot a tank, so on and so forth. But the time to kill is a lot higher at higher tiers, so adding an auto reloader at tier 10 is less damaging to the game than adding one at tier 8 that completely annihilates tier 6s and 7s without those massive downsides of a traditional autoloader. So there's also the possibility of, say, like an IS-7 getting, say, like an IS-3A being put in that has like worse mobility, worse accuracy, but has like an auto reloading gun on it, for example. So it's just one of those, it's a slippery slope. I think it's a pretty bad idea to do this. Yes, it makes the tank better. Is it inherently overpowered? I don't like to use that word. You guys know that. Like the LT-432, best tier 8 tank, tier 8 light tank technically right now that just got released. I think it's mainly, great. Thank you, telemarketer. The LT-432, you know, more or less, yes, it's overpowered in the sense of it's the best tier 8 premium light currently. Only the M41 90mm beats it dealing damage. But tier 8 lights in general, I feel like, are weak and need buffs. So hopefully that comes to where, you know, it's more of a thing to where, yes, they've released it and they're probably counting their money right now, wargaming. But at the same time, it's more showing that tier 8 lights and light tanks in general are weak and need buffs across the board. The IS-3A getting this, it's pretty blatant that it is kind of power creep in a way, and actually really kind of scary as far as balancing goes, because like wargaming releasing like a slightly better tank in the game, whether it's tech tree or premium, is one thing, to where like over the years, like, you know, rebalancing tech tree tanks might make premium tanks a little bit worse. Like we saw that with the preferential matchmaking tanks, and IS-3A here, to where, you know, that this tank quickly kind of got replaced. Things like the Chrysler K and stuff, to where, you know, over time they kind of, you know, they get power creeped. Adding an auto reloader into the mix is terrifying, because if it works out on this tank and it's well received, we could start seeing this on a lot more tanks. And I don't see how they would balance that with like standard heavy tanks basically having to fight without an auto reloader or an auto loader. And say like lower alpha heavies, they're going to need some massive changes, because without either one of those things, you know, kind of lower alpha heavies, they don't exactly work out too well. And even like standard shot non-auto reloading guns on, say, like heavies in general, they're still going to be not favored, because alpha typically wins in World of Tanks, because if you can pump out a ton of damage and then get yourself back into cover, your DPM doesn't matter as much, because the enemy is going to have to expose itself trying to push on you. And, you know, more often than not, alpha typically trumps DPM, because you're not always firing 100% of the time. Anyway, I'm going to try to get a fight here. If it starts lagging, I'm just going to clip the end of this video out, so you won't even see the end of this fight. And so obviously you guys are seeing this clip out here because Paris didn't exactly work out the way the battle went, and, you know, with that CPU usage not working out for that battle. So basically splicing in this battle here right after the fight, I guess, I basically was not able to record it. Not that it went over very well, I'll say that. But more or less, giving it another go into IS-3A here. Hopefully I can get a decent fight here for this kind of rant slash review of the tank coming in 1.3. Let's see what we got here. Got Live Oaks, tier 10 again, and we'll see how this goes. Now, like, talking more about like the ups and downs of this tank, so the mobility being lower, like, that's one thing, and the accuracy. You know, for a map like Live Oaks here, the mobility is gonna hurt it a lot, whereas like the IS-3, technically you can get here in a timely manner. IS-3A, you're going to be struggling to push this southern flank in a decent time, where I'm going to see where my team heads before I actually make that trek, because it could end up being kind of futile pushing down there. We'll find out though. My 270 pen though, if I come across like the Type 5, good luck for me to pen him. Granted, the IS-3 itself will struggle, but with the accuracy, it's going to be pretty darn difficult for me to punch through him unless I can flank. I'm also playing on the test server, so, you know, gameplay's a little bit different. I don't know how the Russian server plays this, because, you know, most of the players on here are from the Russian server. Hopefully my little ace comes in handy here. I'm gonna head to the town though. Like, we have a mouse going south, so we'll see how that works, but I don't think I'm gonna be able to fight down there too well with the gun depression, accuracy, slow mobility. So I guess just go here for once. Why not? It's a test server. And like, as a whole though, I still keep trying to wrap my head around it as I'm making this video, because obviously the test server's only been out for one day, and, you know, they kind of threw this in here without really, you know, kind of talking about it for a little bit, because they mentioned it after the Italian line came out. They were kind of internally testing IS-3A for a bit with this mechanic, and also bringing it to other heavy tanks in the future. You know, basically like the IS-7, like what comes to mind for me, like the ST2 with the dual barrels, they could potentially add it on there, instead of making like a whole new game mechanic for it. And here's their Type 5, obviously, and the BK. Yeah, this is gonna be pretty brutal. Trying to see if I can get this guy to come out. Come on, I'm a US noob here. I don't know how to play. Oh hey, he's gonna come around and shoot me, but there's a T-54. And he's probably like, what's happening here? Hey, there's an IS-3 that can basically kill you. Wish I got him in 2 shots instead of 3, but yeah, can't complain too much. But that's something to where a standard IS-3 can't do that. Like, yes, other tier 8 heavies with autoloaders like AMX 5100, etc., can do the same thing I guess did there, but Progetto, the other auto reloader, have tier 8, not heavy, and like the Pantera can't do that because they only have 240 alpha on those auto reloading guns. Wouldn't have been able to kill them there. So it's just one of those things that the auto reloader, it's a nice concept, but I don't think World of Tanks needs it for a gameplay like perspective on heavies. Ah, come on. I was hoping I could cheat there since I'm chucking heat. I'm gonna go through my premium pretty fast here, I'll say. Alright, so we got this Type 5. I don't know how alone he is, but I honestly can't pen him unless I get to the side, so I'm gonna head this way. It's just, you know, practically like tier 9 and 10s, like this tank is gonna be pretty frustrating to brawl against if this thing can pen you. But it's not inherently like broken in the sense that it's just gonna be too strong against them. The problem just comes with this thing against tier 6s, tier 7s. Let's just get him. Awesome, awesome. But our team's it's holding on to south. It's not doing too well though. Someone did just shoot there. It's just, it's tough to wrap my head around this. Like, it seems hard to explain because it's you know, I've played World of Tanks for a long time. The auto-reloading mechanic's been in the game, you know, with the Italian lines, but it's still something I don't think they should go down this rabbit hole. I think this would be one of the poorer decisions that Wargaming makes, because Alpha's already a pretty strong stat to have. That we're adding it on to heavy tanks like this, I don't think it'll bring any benefit to the game as a whole. If this grill pops out, I don't think he will though. Fortunately, I'm using heat, so penning here is going to be a little difficult if I have to shoot through cover. A T-95 to contend with too. I'm going to try to get a little bit of vision this way. I just have to be careful because, you know, I can get stuck pretty easily with this mobility. Ah, there's that gun depression. Ooh, critted him. I didn't pen, but I did crit him. Alright, I'm actually going to reset everything and swap to APCR. This might be a really, really bad idea. Alright, he's on that other side, though. I just don't want to keep firing heat and then all of a sudden not being able to fire at tanks because I've run out of heat and it forces me to reload. We had that little bit of a downtime there. Here goes nothing. I could pretty much just get erased here. Oh Lord. Hopefully you guys enjoy the spots. I'm hoping to deal damage with this thing, but I'll take spotting people. I'm kind of terrified with this T-95 down here. We need to push the south, to be honest. Like, I don't know if he doubled back the T-95. I would assume so. But, we can't push with these two guys and myself. It's kind of on our team down there to make a little headway, or at least, like, spot somebody, or something. Oh, hello there, Mr. T-44. Hey, I got an auto-reloader. Didn't you get the memo? That's where, you know, firing 3 seconds between the rounds, so your second shell comes 3 seconds, and then the third one in 6 seconds. The amount of times, like, I've surprised people with this so far on the test server, it's been virtually every battle. And here comes the bat chat to ruin me here. This is where the turret traverse can come into play. And my really bad aiming. I don't know how I bounced those 2 heat shells. I got extremely lucky there. I'll say that. Oh my god. I should have been dead. Or killed. Okie dokie. So somehow I survive. I'm trying to get this other shell here. Ah, he's dead. I just wasted it right before I reload it. Yep. Alright, we got T-54 Mod 1 coming for me now. I'm gonna press. It's probably not my best decision. Awesome. I'm getting a little lucky here, but hey, Russian bias, I guess. I guess I didn't get that shot off in time. I could have sworn I clicked before I died, but anyway, pretty nice fight here. Thank you, test server, for actually working for once, because it's been having issues with CPU, like memory leaks or whatever you want to call it. But pretty darn good match, all things considered. A lot of it came down to luck at the end, but it's just basically the auto reloading mechanic. It shouldn't be on heavy tanks. Mediums, yes, like Leopard 1 could use it. Light tanks, sure. Like TDs, I could see it working on, like ones without turrets, like you know, just casemate ones and stuff. Because putting it on something with a lot of alpha and like armor and flexibility, like a heavy tank, especially, you know, beneath like tier 10, like maybe tier 9s it could work, but I don't think even so. I just don't see it adding anything beneficial that World of Tanks needs from a gameplay perspective. Yes, like the IS-3A probably should have the auto reloading mechanic, just based off of the design of the tank, or like the IS-7, stuff like that. But gameplay perspective wise, it hurts the game adding it in, and that's what is sticking with me, and what I can't really, not to say move past, but like figure out a way for it to work, you know. And you know, it says a lot, because like Wargaming, they're not perfect. They have definitely done power creep and bad balancing decisions before, but none of them have really irked me this much, if that makes sense. Compared to this, it seems like a small little nitpick since the mechanics are already in the game, but looking at the bigger picture, the auto reloading mechanic on heavies I don't think is going to work. But you know, anyway, thank you very much for watching this extremely long rant video. Hopefully you enjoyed it, where, you know, if you have any opinions, feel free to comment in the section here on YouTube about the IS-3A. Please be constructive. Like, you don't need to yell at me about it. Like, yes, I'm a community contributor for Wargaming, but I don't actually have to agree with them on everything. But, you know, more or less, you know, please be constructive. Feel free to pop into my live stream and talk about it too. I stream over on Twitch right now. But if you want to do something about this, you know, basically voice your opinions on Reddit. There's, I think, a AMA coming up on Reddit for a World of Tanks developer, an actual developer, like from the main studio for Wargaming. Wargaming also looks at Reddit quite a bit. There's also the forums. You know, just keep things constructive. Like, no death threats. Nobody needs that. You know, at the end of the day, it is a game where you don't need to get that personal. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, even though it's kind of about a sour subject. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you around. Have a good one.